Welcome to the Main Basketball Rankings podcast. I am your host, basketball data nerd Lucas McNally. Well, week 6 is in the books, and yeah, all right, we're over halfway, guys. So Rob Kennedy is here. He's gonna help me overreact to week 6. Great conversation with Rob. Just finished that a few minutes ago, but first we're going to now. First things first, I forgot about this. I have a bit of a correction / retraction to make. Some places, we won't call them media outlets, but some places they'll hear something and they'll get in their little Adobe suite and they'll make up a little thing and they'll put it out for everybody to see. And then when that turns out to not be true, they just leave it up because all they care about is the clicks and stuff. And so, not so much about the ethics of whether or not what you said was true. So I have a little bit of a retraction from last week's episode. In talking to Tyler Cruz, we were talking about Belfast basketball, and I mentioned how was a big believer in that they would be a lot better this year because they got Trevin Ripley from Oceanside as a transfer. And then I said that he had brought one of his AAU teammates along with him. Turns out that is a thing I misheard. I don't remember where I heard it, but I had heard that, and then it sounded reasonable enough. And then I saw they were playing really well in summer ball, and I think I might have seen, don't take this as gospel, that there was another kid that was new, or maybe just a name I didn't recognize. And I think I sort of said to myself, oh, okay, that's the kid that he came over with him. And I didn't verify it. And turns out he's not an AAU teammate that he brought over with him, somebody else entirely. And so someone from Belfast reached out to clarify that for me. And so thank you for that. And that's so he did not bring an AAU teammate over with him. I am still very bullish. I think bullish is the correct one. Bullish is when you're high on something. Whatever it is, bullish, bearish, bullish. Yeah, bullish on Belfast. Chances this year, I think they're going to be vastly improved. They're going to surprise a lot of people. So apologies for misstating that earlier, but it is also nice to know people are listening, because sometimes they say the best way to get an answer on the internet is to post the wrong answer and someone will correct you. So that is kind of what happened. Okay, so that's out of the way. On to the top 10. I'm doing this thing where I reveal the top 10 on the podcast, hopefully to get you to listen to the podcast, because then later I can get those numbers up and sell ads against that and, pay for my gas as I drive around the state. Okay. Number 10, up 14 spots from last week. And this is where people will start to complain. Mahomet Valley. They are 4-2. They're in a 3-way tie for first place in C North. They went to Coney this week, 38-14 against Coney, which was, I think, a surprise to everyone. I went to that game because I'm a Mahomet guy, 1, and 2, there wasn't honestly a game that looked good that was very close to where I live. And so I thought, oh, okay, all right, I can drive to Augusta. And on my way up there, I'm thinking, do I want to drive up to Augusta? I don't know. I don't feel like Coney's going to beat him. But I brought my kid. This was his very first football game. His name is Reese. He's 7 years old. He does not care about football at all. 0%. So then I did a video at the beginning to put on social media, and I had him join me for that. And so let's take a look at that. And Reese, who do you think is going to win this game between Mahomet Valley and Coney?
Coney.
You think Coney's going to win?
Yeah.
Why do you think Coney's going to win?
Because red's my favorite color, so I think they're going to win.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll see how that holds up. It did not hold up. Reese has been banned from all Mahomet Valley events for I'm not sure how long. Have to see. He might have to appeal to be able to go back. But I don't think he's allowed back in Waldoboro for a period of time. It's a real shame. But that's the way it works. He wanted to go home. His very first football game. He asked to go home before the game started. Doing the video was his absolute favorite part of the night. wanted to go home before the game started and every 5 minutes after that, and did not care until I gave him a program and he noticed that there were numbers and names on the program and he started pointing to people and like pointing out and then reading their name, and he mispronounced nearly every single one of them. So he needs the Rob Kennedy pronunciation guide in the program. So anyway, Madomic goes up 14-0 on Coney. They get 2 interceptions by freshman Jaden Ruiz on the first 2 possessions, and then Coney fumbles the kickoff. Worst case scenario for Coney, like just the stuff that makes coaches drink. So Madomic's up 14-0. Coney comes back. Parker Morin throws a touchdown pass to tie the game, and you can see everybody on the sidelines going, "Okay, all right, this is they're gonna roll now." And a very impressive second half from Madomic. They put their foot down. Ruiz finished with 2 touchdowns. He's really having a fantastic freshman season. And so yeah, they move up to 10th. I think this is going to be their high water mark. They have the Lisbon game on the schedule this week. I don't think that's happening. And they have then Belfast. So they're going to have the situation that Stearns is having where they're just going to run out of points in their system. What's also helping them though is that Oceanside lost by a decent amount to Hamden, a Hamden team that they beat 18-0. So not only did they get the bump from their own points from Coney, but they got a really big bump from their win over Hamden because suddenly that win looks a lot better. So that's how you move up quite a bit. They are, by the way, 10th in the state in scoring defense at 12.5 points a game. Okay, number 9, up. Does that say 23? They can't say 23. Anyway, up some number is Portland at 5-1. They are 4th in the state in scoring differential at plus 175. They are 4th in the state in points allowed at 8. They beat Bangor in Bangor 35-7. They will travel to Thornton Academy this week, in which is not the game of the day somehow, but that looks like a really interesting game. Rob and I talked about that in the conversation we're about to have. Down 1 spot from last week, and number 8 is Foxcroft. They are undefeated. They beat Nokomis 20-14. These teams are all within a fraction of a point here, so it's not like an AP poll where you're like, oh, I've lost faith in Foxcroft, I'm dropping them a point. It's fluctuations. It's a touchdown here or there. They of their 6 games, 3 of them, their Foxcroft is in D North, and 3 of their games are against C North, which is turning into a gauntlet of a region. They're 3rd in points allowed at 7.33 a game. They will take on Old Town this week. Down a spot in number 7 is Bonnie Eagle. They're 4-2. They went to Scarborough and put up 70 on Scarborough, 70-14. But Scarborough is not very good, so that doesn't help them as much as you would think. Bonnie Eagle is 6th in strength of schedule. They finally have a positive point differential. Their point differential on the year went from -4 to 52 in 1 game, which is something. They're going to take on Stanford this week. Up 9 spots in number 6 is Wells. They're 6-0. They hammered Winslow 42-6. They're 5th in points scored, 2nd in points allowed at 6.5. They're very high. Why didn't I write it down? Very high in point differential. Not quite near the top. Not quite the top. I think Old Orchard Beach is still number 1. They got a bump from Cape, similar to how Madomic got a bump from Hamden. Cape, they beat Cape opening week 40-0, and then they beat and then Cape went and beat Levitt. Go figure. And so that all of a sudden that Cape win looks really, really good. They will go to. Oh, and they're also getting a big bump from Oak Hill. And I did not write down. Oh, yes, I did. Okay. They will face, in the game of the week, sticking in at the 5th spot, Freiburg, 5-1. They beat Brunswick 47-6. They have the 10th hardest finish schedule remaining, as they have Wells and Gorham. And I thought about going to this. I really did. This looks awesome, but then I looked on the map and saw where Freiburg is. Exactly. And I went, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. That's a long drive on a Friday. Freiburg will be favored by 3 in that one. In fourth, dropping a spot, Stearns 5-1. They beat Washington Academy 52-16. They're just running out of points. They'll drop some more this week. They are second in the state in scoring at 51 points a game. They will take on Valley, who is back from vacation, played their game this week, had a school trip. I don't know. They had to forfeit because something that's, I mean, if they had to forfeit, but it wasn't the worst forfeit of the week. And I think we all know that. And Stearns is going to be favored by 23 in that game. Number 3, up a spot, Falmouth 6-0. They beat Gardner 30-7 on the road. They are first in scoring defense at 6.17 points allowed. You'll notice a theme here that most of these teams are very high in scoring defense. They are plus 144 on the season. That's 12th best in the state. And if you go back a couple episodes, you can listen to my conversation with their head coach, Spencer Emerson. Great conversation. Number 2, holding steady, Kennebunk 6-0. They beat Chevers 42-10. They are plus 145 on the year. That is 11th best. They have a pretty good game this week. They're playing, there it is, Massive Besic is ranked 17th. Rob and I talked about that too. And number 1, holding at number 1 is Thornton Academy. They are 5-1. They beat South Portland 35-7. They have the 4th hardest strength of schedule. Then all these teams are kind of clustered in the top 10, but Thornton Academy is starting to pull away a little bit, just a little. They've got some breathing room. They will take on Portland this week. That looks like a fantastic game. There's a lot of really good games this week. So without further ado, there's your top 10. Thornton Academy, Kennebunk, Falmouth, Stearns, Freiburg, Wells, Bonnie Eagle, Foxcroft, Portland, and Madomic Valley. If you don't like that, feel free to get on the internet and tell me about it. Email me, tag me on social media, whatever. Tell me how wrong it is. Why not? And with having said that, let's go to my conversation with the great Rob Kennedy. Okay, Rob Kennedy is here. You will recognize, maybe not his face, but you'll definitely recognize his voice from state championship games, numerous tournament games, WHOU's broadcast of football games this year. Thank you for joining me, Rob.
Hey, thanks, Lucas. Really glad to be here, and it's always fun to talk high school sports, high school football this time of year.
I've been meaning to get you on forever because I think you were the first media person who I didn't already know who was supportive of me back before I even had a blog or anything.
Kidding. Huh.
Yeah,
because I knew back in the message board days.
Message board days. Yeah, I already knew Don Shields from radio 100 years ago. But yeah, you were the first person who I didn't know who was like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Well, I was always fascinated by it because it was, at first I was kind of like, there's no real way you can put maps together and kind of predict something as unpredictable as high school sports. I mean, there's so many variables with kids, but then the more, you kind of worked on that and had more data to go with, the more you really did start to see it go together. And as it's not perfect, but it does give a real good understanding of basketball. And then of course you need a media guide. That's, I think, what really hooked me later on was being a media person, having all that information at my fingertips. Once I figured out how to read what you had there, that was the tough part for me, not being a math person, trying to decipher all of it. Once I learned that, it was great.
You're like, first of all, I don't have to look this up anymore. So that's great.
That was great.
And then what do these numbers mean? What do they mean in the real, because you can't just go like, if you're doing a baseball game, you're like, is wins created per blah, 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 blah. And the audience is going to go, yeah, I don't know what that means, dude. But once you can figure out how to convey that to the audience, then it becomes pretty helpful.
It's good in telling the story of games. That's it. Any little bit you can kind of have to add some context to why, maybe the game is playing out the way it is. It's always good for a broadcast because that's, we're in the business of storytelling. So anything that helps kind of lend some information to what you're seeing happening is always a good thing to have.
Yeah. And you always see, or not always, but sometimes you'll see guys who just don't understand the math of it at all, and they're doing a broadcast and you're like, what are you talking about? Like, you're just like, did you just show up and they said, hey, it's this team and this team, and here's the roster, do your best?
And sometimes I think, not with a lack of prep aspect you're kind of alluding to there. That hasn't been me, but there's been times where I have, looked at some of the numbers and been, baffled by them and trying to make them into something that maybe they're not. But
Mhm.
what I have liked overall is, you sometimes see, for example, if you follow your model, things that are called upsets that really aren't upsets. And I always kind of find
Right.
that to be amusing to it. It's like, this isn't an upset. This is kind of be expected if you really kind of follow the basketball season and with the numbers to back that up. It makes it even better.
And sometimes it's just an upset because they're too far away from Portland
Yeah, that can be the case, and I do, and to defend or Bangor for that matter,
or
it's
Bangor, yeah.
media centers. I mean, you only have so many games that you can cover. So when you're looking at the amount of work some of the reporters have to do, I mean, it's understandable why maybe they wouldn't have seen, oh, I don't know, a team that's not in their coverage area. I can't think I want to throw up my head as a good example right now because I'm not really in basketball mode yet. But we
I think
don't know as much
Caribou's a
about.
good example from the
I think
Caribou
that's a great.
championship game.
Yeah, that's a great example overall. Yeah, because the county knows Caribou. Bangor probably does, but you get down to Augusta, south of there, Caribou may as well be the moon. So it's not something that you might have heard about them. They're good. They're playing the state championship game, but come on, a Aroostook County team going to come all the way down here and win a gold ball against a Southern team? Forget it. And well, of course they did, and it wasn't that much of a surprise to people who had followed the season all along.
I think we're actually favored
Yeah.
in that game. And because the model like sort of flagged them kind of early as like, hey, there's something going, this team's pretty good. And then I started to keep an eye on it. And I was like, oh no, they can win this whole thing. This will be cool.
I didn't do any of their games that year, and I didn't have the state championship game. I wasn't working for MPBN at that point, but I had the model, and I had Steve Carmichael from WHOU up in Aroostook County, and he was convinced that Caribou was going to come down and win, and so both those things, and having Steve up there, boots on the ground in the county, I kind of was more. I was ready for that Caribou victory to happen overall. I just wish I could have gotten there because it was just a great atmosphere that day at the
Oh my
Civic.
gosh.
The
It
whole,
was
whole
so cool.
whole place had rolled down to Cumberland County, and that was great from what I saw on the broadcast. Watching it later, it really was cool.
Yeah, I mean, you had drunk guys from Caribou in the hockey press box way up at
Yeah.
the top.
Well, I think that's something that's people don't understand about high school sports. You go other parts of this country, and it's really an afterthought in a lot of places. People do it, but it's not really paid attention to outside of friends and family for the most part. And when I lived in St. Louis, high school sports in St. Louis County were really not something that, outside of rare exceptions, were really paid that much attention to. And I know why. I mean, you've got Mizzou, you've got the Cardinals, you've got the Blues, you got so many big time sports in that state and in that area. But here, we're a collection of small communities for the most part. I mean, our biggest city is nothing compared to you get other parts of this country. Our biggest schools here are small schools in other states. So when you look at the community aspect of things, I think that Caribou win really that in the main event that really kind of showed just how important high school sports and basketball in recent memory were to people here in Maine. So there's other examples as well. You can go way back. You mentioned Don Shields and have a bunch of stories from the mid coast and what things meant to Rockland or Georges Valley or all the schools he's covered now or back in the day. And that's why I do what I do when it comes to broadcasting. I like being around that the high school sports community because it's just so much fun as a lifelong almost Mainer. Growing up here, coming back to Maine after 8 years away, it's really something that I've always enjoyed, and it's really, I think, unique to this state and maybe only a couple others.
And I tell people it's it's $4 or $5 to get into a game, and you're not going to get a better entertainment value anywhere. You get a JV game, you get a varsity game, you get some great people watching. If the game's a bust,
There's a good snack bars sometimes too. That's the thing as
Yeah.
well with all the snack bars that you have of football and basketball. I know Dave Dyer's kind of done some work on that, as others have too. So it's great. You have a lot of reasons to go and see high school sports.
I want to know when the rankings of the food is coming out. I want to see
Yeah.
because I can't do that because I can't do gluten, and it's like 90% gluten at these
Right.
things.
That's true. I would think gluten free at a high school snack bar is probably not something. My wife is gluten free, and I know everywhere else a lot more options than there were even 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh
High
yeah.
school snack bars have not quite caught up to that trend.
I have to bring food to the expo, and they
Yeah.
give me grief like once a year, and I go, look, you don't sell anything I can eat,
Yeah.
so give me a
Yeah,
break.
it's amazing sometimes that they're really sticklers as far as, you're not bringing that donut in here. Oh, okay.
I wanted to talk to you actually about the main event, because what I thought was really impressive, and this is going to be more of me complimenting you than a question, is I think a lot of people broadcasting that could have done it's the Cooper and Ace show, and there's 8 other guys on the floor, and who cares about them? I think that would have been, I think I can think of some people who are professional broadcasters who would have taken that approach. And what I appreciated about you is you clearly did a deep dive into these other players and these other elite athletes. And I thought that was just like such a testament to your work ethic and to your ability that you would do that. And I couldn't believe how up to speed you got. So how
Well,
long did
thank
that
you.
take?
A while. Thank you. First of all, I rewrote that up. I read that like the next day or a couple days later on in your website, and that was one of the things that I'm really, as a broadcaster, I pride myself on. I don't have the best pipes. There's guys that have better voice than I do. There's things that I see other broadcasters do. They're like, yeah, they do it better than I do. But one thing I always wanted to pride myself on is my preparation. I think that's so important when you're looking to kind of tell a full story of the game. So with that main event, I don't know how it started really. I had the rosters of both schools, and in my mind going in was, of course, it's going to be Cooper and Ace. They're coming back to Maine, but then I just saw the list of these players and who they were and where they were going, and I just wanted to find more about Derek Queen, for example, and other who he's going to Maryland because he was uncommitted at the time, and just some of
Mhm.
these other guys because we're looking at players that are going to be marquee names, many of them in the NCAA, and others. Some of those guys might end up being big players along with Cooper in the NBA. So
Yeah.
it really kind of turned into let's appreciate this showcase for me anyway. It's more the feature, of course, is Cooper and Ace, but the talent on the floor is unlike anything I'd ever seen before, and I think most fans had ever seen before. And it was just so amazing to have players like that at that caliber, being directly in front of us at the Civic Center, and then the next night at the Expo was still an amazing event. And I'm still kind of find it hard to believe that kind of thing happened in Portland, Maine.
Yeah, it's wild because there's probably I don't know, there might be 3 NBA All-Stars in that game other than
There
Cooper,
could be. There could be. I
you
mean,
know?
that's we'll see these names later. I'm like, I kept my, and I kind of almost wish it would have been a very fanboy thing to do, so I couldn't have done it. But I kind of wish I could have brought my spotting chart, which I still have, over and got some of the guys to sign it. But I'm like, I can't do that. But it would have been nice to have as a memento. I could have framed it later with some of the guys and the places they're going to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's you so now you've just got a list of these guys that you're just following as
Yeah,
they
it's like
go through
once
their careers.
and I had, if Cooper ends up in the NBA, in the Basketball Hall of Fame sometime in Springfield, I'll be like, yeah, did that game once here that he played in back in Maine. And it's still, I think that'll be one of the highlights when all is said and done for me broadcasting, be one of the highlights that I have. And it was just, amazing to see that it was a kid from Maine who made that all happen.
Yeah, and, I've listened to professional broadcasts of, like, Major League Baseball games where they're like, "Eh, the 3rd baseman for this other team is Scott," I think that says Roland. We don't really know much about him, but, we'll see if he's any good, and you're like, "Guys, come on."
Yeah, and sometimes that can happen if you have like a surprise, but usually in pro sports, you know pretty well who's in the lineup. And I mean,
Yeah,
even college sports, and I know who's coming in for college sports. You got to know, and that's I think the standard at when I'm doing D1 broadcasters I talk to are doing ECAC hockey. All have that idea that you've got to just know. So
you
it's
do.
it's a bar that I really I enjoy the research part of it. It's to me it's fun, but I really like to have things that when something happens in a game it's nice to have some information that maybe you weren't going to use and maybe you didn't think it would come up, but then there it is, and now you're talking about it, and it's a really good thing.
In college, I did play-by-play for an NAIA school, and we got no information. We would get a media guide that was the stat sheet, and that would be pretty much it. So, I mean, I know how hard it is to just sort of try to cobble something together when you don't have that information.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back any length of time, to college, whether and I started 22 years ago, I was working at Colby, and they had a very good sports information department, but the internet was really still kind of in its infancy. You didn't have the
Mhm.
numerous stat sites that are up right now. And what I kind of think will happen is 20 years from now, broadcasters who are doing high school sports, and this will probably make you happy down the road, will have a lot more information to stats and things like that as things continue. I think we'll see more of that as time heads on. But 20 years ago, it's kind of like high school now. You can find some information, but it's a lot more difficult. Today, anything in college you want to do, Division I, Division III. I mean, I do junior college over at Central Maine Community College. All the numbers are all right there on the Yankee Small Conference site. It's great to see how it's developed, and it really makes broadcasters' lives a lot easier.
I remember doing a game in Ohio where we were just over the moon because they had an old computer, like, geez, this must have been running like DOS or something, and it would update the stats of the rebounds and the assists in
the early live
somewhat real time. And I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, live stats. I mean, I didn't start using live stats, so I started with maybe they were at Bowdoin, definitely at Dartmouth, and that was a game changer. You have all this right here. You have to keep track of all these things. I mean, not everyone's Don Shields with his 14 different colored pens that he can just kind of. It's like watching Neil Peart play drums, watching him kind of on the paper with every single stat. I'm surprised he's not doing like individual time of possession for players, but he has all that stuff down. For me, it was like, oh, good, live stats. I'll just look at that now and let someone else do the hard work for me.
I've sat next to him doing the live stats, and I'll double check my numbers against his.
Yeah.
And he's usually right. It's, even just rebounds. We're maybe like one off from each other on rebounds and assists and things.
It's uncanny. And, when I first started calling basketball, he was one of the mentors that I had over at Fox Sports Maine. And, you learn by working with other people what you will take and what you won't take. And one thing I learned right away from Don Shields was there's no way I'm even going to attempt to try that. I've had a hard enough time calling the game, doing all this stuff. Forget it. So I don't know how he does it, but he does it. And it's really amazing to see.
He's got a whole system, and if you ever get a chance to look at it, it's really impressive. It's a little OCD. It's a little insane, but in a good way.
Yeah, very much so.
All right, so you're calling football games for WHOU now. Is this your first year doing WHOU football?
Second year with WHOU.
Second year.
Football,
okay. Yeah. And you're doing games with Jared Richmond.
Right.
How did you get involved with WHOU? Because you've been doing basketball with them for a couple of years, right?
Well, they started doing a game of the week. The HOU really, of course, go back 10, 12 years ago, they were, mostly kind of limited to doing the county games. And then they started to have more of a statewide footprint and got more into Central Maine. And, Fred Grant, the owner, I think really kind of had a vision that he could be could kind of cover the entire state. So he needed some folks down further south. He has Ethan Snow kind of pulling all the strings down in Portland, and up here for football in Central Maine, and then basketball too, coming this year in the tournament. He's got me and basically says, put some games together and we're going to cover that area. You pick a game of the week and, pick some good ones and we'll kind of go where you want to go. So Jared Richmond had decided he wasn't going to coach at Winthrop, where he'd been for several years, actually. So I was able to bring him along as a color commentator because I knew he was going to be great at that from a coach's perspective, and he is. And we just kind of look at, when the football schedule comes out, try to pick the best games. And, if we see something that, doesn't look as good on paper as it did 6 weeks ago, we can always pivot. We've had pretty good success picking some interesting games. And over the last couple of weeks, some very close games, and all types of schools too, big and small. We've spent some time at, South Portland. We're going there again this week. We've been to Bonnie Eagle a couple of times, just kind of out of the way the schedule worked. We were at Maranacook last week. So big schools, small schools. The only thing we haven't been able to do is 8-man. And that's mostly because just where we're located, some of the 8-man schools already have coverage, like Waterville, for example. They have a stream every night. We were looking to get a Waterville game, but one thing I'm not going to do is to step on someone's toes who covers a team for the entire season. So if Waterville's covered by Epic View Studios, Brian, they do a great job up there. It's like, we're not going to come in and kind of muscle in on their territory. We'll pick someplace else. And a lot of the 8-man schools are a bit more of a drive, especially now with Deergo and Maranacook being back up in 11, than covering in our area some of the 11-man teams. So we want to do 8-man, and HOU does 8-man, but Jared and I haven't gotten to any yet and won't this year until the postseason. But that is a priority for us next year because we want to feature the 8-man game as much as we feature the 11-man game. And same goes for big and small schools.
Yeah, I mean, if Epic View is already there, there's no point in you being there too. There's plenty of other games to pick.
Well, that's it. I mean, for viewers, there's no reason to have say a playoff game. Sure, I can understand that, but
Right.
regular season game. There's so many of them, and if you're looking at a sponsor, an outlet that has sponsors, it's just I kind of feel like Munzing Media covers Gardner. There's no way
Right.
I'm going to Hoke Field to do a game that Rob's doing. It's just not something and I would say that even if I wasn't, I go back way back with Rob Munzing. I would say that if I didn't go way back with Rob, it just to me is not something that I want to do. So, I always check out the schedules to see what the outlets in this area are doing, whether it's Munzing Media, Epic View, The Score, and try to, kind of have them do their games and we'll go someplace else, especially because we have a bigger coverage area. I mean, really, Waterville South is mostly fair game for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, it's just, the parents want to see the games, grandparents
Yep.
want to see the games, and there's no point in having two people at the same game
There's not.
for a regular season game, and I think that sometimes people forget that their audience is. I think it's easy to go, okay, we're covering the game, but sometimes it's easy to forget that the audience is grandma
Yeah.
who can't get out to the game and doesn't want
Right.
to sit out in the cold or in the hot sun or whatever, and that's who you're trying to get really is
Out
so
of
they can see their.
staters, family members, community
Yep.
members who aren't going. I mean, you've got some people who just like high school sports and will watch, and that's great too. But I mean, really, it's about, to me, focusing on communities. And that's why we haven't been as successful this year as we'd like, just because of schedules trying to get to as many places. But, it's not our only year. We have more years, and,
Right.
we're going to spend a lot of time this year as it worked out in South Portland. We'll definitely get back to South Portland. We like going down there. But, next year, we'll be like, okay, let's get that game in. And well, why don't we get to, I don't know, Kennebunk? We didn't get there this year. Let's head
They're
down to
good.
Kennebunk. But they're very good. They're very good. I mean, that just hasn't. I haven't been to Kennebunk's field yet, so I didn't want to start looking at broadcasting there until I kind of knew we could do it. But that'll be a priority for future years. There's plenty of schools that would like to go to. We haven't gone to yet.
How much easier is it than it was 5 years ago to do a football game and actually stream it?
Well, I don't really do the technical stuff, but it
Okay.
seems to me a lot easier because just the 5G technology and hotspots and all the ways you can kind of bring your own connectivity.
Are you
It
using
really used to.
5G and hotspots? And you're not
Well,
wiring?
it depends. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay.
Not every press box is wired, not even close. So a lot of times you have to have the hotspots to do that. When we do that at Marana Cook, actually most press boxes aren't wired. Even down at Portland, it is, but not having been there this year, I'm not sure what the access is like. So a lot will use 5Gs and hotspots to do that. It's different inside the high schools for basketball. You're a lot more likely to get a dedicated connection, a hardwired connection at a basketball game than you are for football. So when you look at the evolution of the technology, streaming is not easy. And I know that just from watching the people who are the technical wizards, but I think
Right.
it has gotten easier than it has been 5 years ago. And I think that's why you're seeing more of it.
And Fred's really good at figuring that stuff out.
Yeah, and he hires people who are really good. Ethan Snow is an outstanding producer. We worked with him last week. We'll work with him the next couple of weeks. Ben Grant, we work with quite a bit. Fred's son knows the technology inside and out. So, and that's what I need because that's not my forte. I could learn it, but there's that old adage about old dogs and new tricks and all that stuff. So I'm plenty more comfortable letting some of the younger tech wizards kind of get that stuff set up and make sure we're going out and let me kind of handle the game itself.
It's a variant on the, you young guys, you got some strong legs. You could carry
I'm
those
getting that
boxes
point,
up the hill.
I don't mind carrying the boxes. It's the technical stuff when something you get an error message like I have no idea what to do with this, and you're 20 minutes from trying to get a game on the air and over the internet. Yeah, what do you do? And I'm highly anxious in the first place. That would just kind of make my head explode.
Yeah, all of a sudden the Wi-Fi is not working. You're like, oh crap.
What do we do? Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you had Marana Cook this week. That was one of the games on my list here. Dirigo Marana Cook. How did that game go? Dirigo won that by 10, right?
They did. It was a good game. Marana Cook, the reason Dirigo won that game was they took advantage of a couple of mistakes. I mean, one was a botched snap that was deep in Marana Cook's zone, and the punter, unfortunately, and this is kind of where the high school rules get you, the punter went down to get the ball off the ground, and unfortunately for him, when he picked up the ball, his knees touching the ground, plays dead immediately. You don't see that in high school, in college or pros rather, but that was just kind of the bad luck, and it's that Marana Cook up inside the 10 someplace, maybe even inside the 5. very short field. They scored the touchdown. They don't have a kicker, so they went for 2, made it 8-0. And then a safety. It was a safety that was at the end of the first half that they scored, and that made it a 2-score game, and that made it tough for Moranico because they're physical. They can hit you. They got a good line. They run the football. They will throw, but running's their bread and butter. And they're a methodical offense. They're not like a quick strike team. So down 2 scores. It was tough for them to come back, especially when you look at Diergo as a very good defensive team. So it was a bit of a war of attrition, but I don't say that in a bad way. I like those kind of games. It was fun. The clock kept moving. Probably a few too many penalties to make the coaches happy, but I enjoyed that game, and we'll definitely go back to Moranico again next year, and we'll be there for basketball this year too. Like that game a lot, and it was good to see those 2 teams after having some struggles, moving from 8-man to 11-man with kids who haven't played 11-man before. Both coaches said, yeah, we've had some growing pains, but both are doing well back up at 11-man, and the programs are thriving.
We had this discussion at work. We were trying to figure this out. It seems that do teams go for 2 and just not kick field goals and extra points? Is it because they don't have someone who can kick extra points, or is it the math? They figure they can convert the 2-point conversion 50% of the time.
A little of both. I think the teams that have a reliable kicker will kick it.
Okay.
If you're in the idea of like a kicker that is sort of reliable, you kick it the first time. If he makes it, you keep doing it. If he doesn't, now you're going for 2 to make it up. And if you're a team that does not have reliable kicking, you're looking at that 50-50 opportunity. You get 1 out of 2. It's still the same as kicking 2 extra points. So I think all 3 of those exist. It really depends on the makeup of the team. But I think you notice a lot of the larger schools tend to have will kick more extra points. Question of numbers. The ability to get a kicker when you have more kids to draw from is a lot greater than it is, in a small school where you just don't have the numbers. So I think I think all 3 have a lot to do with it, but it really, I think, to me, comes down to, do you have the talent in the first place? Do you have a kicker? And if you don't, well, that makes your decision easy.
And if you're a big school, you can probably get someone who didn't make the soccer team.
Or you get someone off the soccer team in some cases. I know schools have done that as well, but yeah, there's always options.
I almost wonder if it's a thing where if you're, in the NFL, it's basically 100% proposition, roughly 95, something like that. But in high school, might be a 70% on that extra point.
I mean, and that might even be high. I mean, it's just a gut feeling. I don't know. Obviously, I don't have the numbers, but to me, it does seem like, I'd say 2/3 would be a decent estimate, and maybe a little less, 60%. I mean, I think if you have a kicker who's nailing 3 out of 4 extra points, you're probably using that kicker on almost every occasion you have to kick the extra point.
But then the math question gets easier on the 2-point conversion. Then you only have to convert, 40% for that to make sense.
Yeah, and that's it though. I mean, and I guess it comes down to, what are your strengths there? Do you have a powerful offensive line? What do you have as far as, in the backfield for quarterbacks and runners? What are your options there? And if you be diversified and have a lot of weapons, then yeah, it will make a lot of sense to go for 2.
Yeah. So the game I went to this week was I went to Madomic Coney, and Coney has a kicker, and I was like, oh my gosh, they kicked an extra point. Look at that.
It used to be, it still is a new thing, because look back 20 years ago again when I started, most teams didn't have reliable kicking, and now you see more that do. And Coney, yeah, they absolutely do.
And yeah, they have a great facility. I just want to say, because I hadn't been to their facility. We were talking about this before we started recording. Yeah. Just really one of the better ones I've seen. I haven't seen a lot of them because all the big ones are like 2 hours from my house. But that was a really nice one.
I like when they refurbished Alumni Field and they put down the turf. I really felt it became, one of the crown jewels of the area. Now, Messalonsky's followed suit. Gardner's done the same thing as well, and they're nice facilities too. I've been to Coney more than any of them, and I really like going to Coney. It's really set up well for broadcasting, except the booths are really small. You kind of need 2 of them. But outside of that, it's a really good place. The view is great, and I've always enjoyed the Coney program. And this is, if I was not working Friday, this is Coney Gardner coming up this week, and I'd absolutely be attending that game. And I forget if it's at Coney or at Gardner. I think it's this week. So this week or next?
I don't know. It didn't make my list of like.
It might be next week. I'll have to check. It could be the last week of the season.
Oh, wait, there it is. Coney at Gardner. Coney is favored by 3.
It is this week. Yeah, I thought I saw that. It's often been the last week of the season, which is why it threw me a little bit. But that's one I would love to go to. Is that at Coney or Gardner this year?
It was at Gardner.
It's at Gardner. So for me, it doesn't matter. They're both great fields. But yeah, that's a game that's always piqued my interest, and ever since I moved here, has been one I've always liked to see.
So the game, that game I went to, it was your classic overreaction game.
Mm.
Everyone that I talked to thought Coney was going to win. They were favored. And then in the first two possessions, Parker Morin throws an interception to Madomic's freshman, and then they fumble a kickoff, and it's 14-0, and everyone's just going, "Whoa,
Yeah.
what the hell is happening here?"
I can tell you that was the reaction that we had down in Standish. As we follow the scores, on the main high school football Facebook page. Andrew Hart does his
Mm-hmm.
half-hour updates, and we saw that scores like I did. I felt Madomic's a good team, but Coney to me was, until Falmouth emerged, Coney was my preseason pick out of Class B North, and I still kind of felt, and it might still happen.
Yeah.
We overreact if we want to, but I still, I looked at the idea that that Coney would be, to me, the most likely team to be playing Falmouth in the regional finals, and they still might be. I mean, the year they won the states in 2013, they had a loss to Greeley that was pretty baffling. Right around this time of year, and everyone started writing them off. And I got to admit, I didn't write them off back then. Ben Lucas was too good, but I did kind of have my doubts. Are they really going to be able to win a state championship with that loss? That's a bad loss. I
Mm-hmm.
don't consider the Madomic loss a bad loss, given what Madomic's doing right now in Class C South. But it was a surprise for Coney. And I think, as Coach B.L. Lippert intimated in the paper, it just kind of shows these guys have work to do to get to where he wants them to be, playing their best football going into the playoffs. Buy or no buy. I know they like the buy, but to him, you got to be playing your best football. And I think that might serve as a wake-up call. They've got some work to do. And sometimes there's such a thing as a good loss. Maybe in hindsight, that loss to Greeley turned out to be a good loss for the state championship team in Coney in 2013. Maybe this turns out to be a good loss for the Rams here in 2024. We'll see.
The thing I thought was most interesting about the game is, you get that disaster start and you're down 14-0, and okay, that happens. And then they came back, they tied the game, and everyone sort of felt like, okay, here we go. We've all seen this movie before. But Dominic put the hammer down in the second half. They've got this freshman runner, Jaden Ruiz, who had 2 touchdowns. He had a couple big runs called back by penalties, and they pretty much dominated the second half of that game, which was, I thought, the biggest surprise.
Yeah, I expect, Coney coming back, and I know what kind of kids they have, and I know their character. So, getting down 14 points, not optimum, but certainly not time to, tuck your tails and run. That's not what Coney does. So I expected the same thing. And again, you're kind of speaking to my experience down in Standish. We saw that happen. We saw the scores. They came back. All right, it's kind of like, yeah, that's what we expected. Normal service has been restored in Augusta. But, Madomic very, very impressively pulled away in that game. And so what that tells me is that the Class C finals, the Class C playoffs in the North, are going to be really interesting. You have 3 teams right now at 4-2, and they all seem to be right around the same level. It's going to be a lot of fun when you look at Herman and Oceanside and Madomic, when, whatever the mix-up is going to be of those teams, whatever order they will finish in. That's going to be fun to watch in the postseason.
And Oceanside plays Herman this week. They lost to Hamden last week, which was another surprise. That was the score that came through. You went, okay, because Hamden had just lost to Madomic, I think 18-0, something like that. So this Oceanside Herman game is going to be huge this week.
Yeah, and Hamden kind of put itself on the map with that, when it's like, hey, don't forget about us. We're talking about those 3 teams. That's a team that maybe could throw a scare into whoever they play in the first round of the playoffs too. So look out. And the game this week, the Oceanside game with Herman's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it could be a situation where, which side of the bracket do you want to be on?
Yeah, look at the standings right now. It is really a pick your poison type of situation. It's, you're kind of looking at, if those are the top 4. I mean, if you're Oceanside, who do you want? Do you want Madomic? Do you want Hamden? I mean, is there really a better option there? I'm not sure as we come down the stretch that, you want to make that pick. It kind of reminds me of the new league, the Professional Women's Hockey League. They had a unique system of playoffs that the top 2 teams, the 4 teams, the top 2, the number 1 team gets to pick who they're playing. So you do get to pick your poison. It's a really cool idea. Now, the problem this year was the team that finished first picked their poison and got beat.
Oh, yeah, because you pissed them off.
Yeah, it's sometimes you underestimate them. And I don't know. If I'm Oceanside, let's say Oceanside finishes number 1. I mean, that's far from a foregone conclusion, but just say that's where they are now. Let's just say that's what happens.
Right.
I don't know who I want. I mean, you look at Hamden, they're playing very good football. You look at Madomic, you played them already, but they're your arch rival, and you want a rivalry game in the first round. I'm not sure that you do. So that's
and that game could have swung.
What's
They
that?
could have easily lost that game. I was at that game, and Madomic had a couple dumb turnovers that swung that game.
Yeah, that's the little things will do it like that. So yeah, I mean that's it's be a lot of fun. And last year was kind of like the lineup and let's see who gets murdered by Levitt tournament.
Yeah,
Freiburg's awfully good this year. Let's not take anything away, but I do see. I think the Class C game is going to be something to watch. I mean, Freiburg's good, but they're not generationally good like that Levitt team was last year.
right.
I mean, that was, I'll use the word unfair, not in a way that it should have been rectified, because I don't think it should have been, but it was just, to have Levitt have all those guys at once. I mean, good luck to anyone playing them in the postseason back last year. Freiburg almost stunned them, but really, when they got to the state finals, I just don't see how this is going to be close. All respect to Oceanside, but this might be the year that Oceanside wins a gold ball, but it could be the year that a lot of teams win a gold ball this year.
Yeah, and I still can't figure out what to make of Levitt. The model doesn't know what to do with them because they'll almost beat they'll beat Coney. They'll get blown out by Winthrop. They'll lose to Cape. It's just like I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on.
I can't figure them out either. I know they're young. I mean, it's a completely new team, and it might be a situation where Mike Hathaway is doing a really good job, but not getting a ton of credit for it because he's got to pick up the pieces of a team that's a lot of graduates and not start over. I mean, the feeder program at Levitt is top notch, but it's still different from going from feeder program and guys that haven't gotten a lot of varsity experience outside of maybe some late game blowouts, and now making them starters against teams. Every last one of them is coming gunning for you. So, I saw them once. They probably shouldn't have lost that game to Winthrop in week one. They really were the architects of their own demise. And then Winthrop, to their credit, took advantage of every opportunity they gave them. So I think it's just maybe a situation that Levitt's just undergoing some growing pains, which means the talent is there, as you can see with their win against Coney, but inconsistency too is a hallmark of young teams, and that might be the case at Levitt.
And in football, the inconsistencies can hurt you more than they do in basketball, because in basketball,
a single game, sure.
Like 3 or 4 dumb mistakes, you can paper over that pretty easily in basketball, but in football, not so much.
No, you lose the ball, you lose points, you lose field position. There's just so much riding in every possession.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of was looking at Levitt, thinking of the basketball programs with good feeder systems, and I'm like, well, okay, so if they lose everybody, what's your worst case scenario? 10-8, something like that. 11-7. So I was like, well, I feel like they're will finish 4-4 or 5 and whatever. But yeah, so they've been, I don't know, I just don't know what to make of them. There doesn't seem to be a consistent theme to it.
We talked about Hammond Academy being a team that no one wants to play. I mean, Levitt, if Levitt can kind of find their stride and kind of be consistent, they're a team that no one's going to want in the postseason either. I mean, they're still the Levitt Hornets. They're still talented. They still have an outstanding coaching staff that gets them ready for those games. And, when they don't, Mike Hathaway is very quick to say, and he did against Winthrop, I didn't have him ready to play. But I also think that oftentimes, he's kind of doing what coaches should do in that situation. I'm going to take a bullet for my kids. Right. I don't really see him being somebody who's, not taking everything into consideration when it comes to preparing for an opponent. There's only so much you can do. And, with a young team, again, if they find their stride, look out. Freiburg's going to be the favorite, and the road to the state championship team is going to go through Freiburg. But that could be a really interesting matchup down the road if it does turn into a Levitt-Freiburg showdown for a chance to go play at a state game again.
How much would Freiburg hate it if they got Levitt in the first round?
I don't know. In some ways, I don't know. In some ways, I think they might welcome that because they came that close to beating the Hornets last year. And I don't know much about the Freiburg program as far as individuals. It's not a team I get to cover all that much. In fact, I can't remember the last time I covered a Freiburg football game. I remember I did one at Freeport once, but I don't know if there's been any since. So I can't speak of any experience as far as knowing the staff up there. But I also wonder too, you come that close. That's the demon you got to slay. So they're going to come to your place regardless. You want them in the first round. Let's get it out of the way. Let's get this checked off our list right now. We've been waiting to play them. I know they must have had the game circled in their calendar in the regular season. Why not get them in the first round of the playoffs if that's what it comes to? So I'm not sure Freiburg would be upset about that at all. And in fact, it might be a good thing for the Raiders if that's how it comes to pass.
Well, that was one of the talking points for the Celtics with the Heat, this past year. It's like, oh, well, let's get them out of the way.
And there's something to that. There's definitely something to that. I mean, you basically you got to kill the demon that's vanquished you already. Go get them. Same thing with anybody who's got who's had a team's number. Always so important to beat them. If you beat them early, I think that can set some really great momentum. It's like we just slayed the dragon. We're
Yeah.
untouchable, and that's
Yeah.
that whole 10 feet tall and bulletproof mentality that is so important in sports.
Yeah. So Freiburg this week they have the game of the day, as they're hosting Wells, which
Oh
is,
yeah,
geez, that's going to be a humdinger. I thought about going to that, and then I went on Google Maps to see how far Freiburg is from my house.
can't get there from here, can you? It's
No.
East-Western Maine is not the easiest thing to do, and that'll be a very pretty ride. And if it
Yeah.
was a Saturday afternoon game, I'd probably say, if I was not going to be someplace else, I would make that trip too. But yeah, Friday night, Freiburg driving home, and I don't think I'd want to do that.
That's a
but
hike.
but anyone who's and Wells is not terribly far from there, so it's not a bad trip for them. Anybody who's close to that, it's gonna be a great game to see. And I think we're going to find an awful lot about Wells and about Freiburg. And I think we found a lot about Freiburg in the game against Falmouth. To play that game against a really good Falmouth team, to me, they didn't win that game, but that was one where you looked at, all right, they didn't win, but I think they just kind of really just affirmed that they're a force to be reckoned with because of the way they played one of the top teams so far in the state. And I think they solidified, to me anyway, that they are the team to beat in Class C South. If they weren't already, that just kind of sealed the deal for me.
And that result's looking better by the week for them.
Yeah, it's every time that Falmouth plays and wins, they played that game. It helps them in the Crabtree. But I mean, Wells hasn't lost to a Class D team, so they're playing a Class C school in Freiburg. Intriguing to see how that goes because it's hard to get a read on Wells sometimes, just because they do play mixed class games, but when you're playing some of the teams in Class D, you're really not seeing what Wells is capable of because they don't have to show it. They'll have to show it against Freiburg, I think. So they have Freiburg and then they have Winthrop Monmouth coming to visit after that. So it could be a matchup of two undefeated teams. It could be a matchup of a team with one loss. If Wells loses, and if that's the case, you're really going to see a fight if Wells needs to get back on the winning ways to take on the team that will be potentially the lone, I bet will be the lone undefeated team back in Class D if Wells is not able to beat Freiburg. And I don't know who to pick in that game. That should just be a great contest.
Is anyone broadcasting it? Do we know?
Well, I do know that that North Conway does it on tape delay, but I don't think they stream it. I know they show the Freiburg games. And I've seen them before. They do a good job, and I forget it's on the tip of my tongue the gentleman's name who does that. And I've interacted with him a couple of times on the Facebook message board, the football Facebook page. But yeah, they do that, but I don't believe they stream. It's too bad because that's one that I would love to watch a replay of later on.
Yeah, and they're Freiburg's for basketball. They have a Vimeo channel that streams their games. It's hard to find. And it's hard to find individual games.
Same situation. I would not expect that their field's wired because so few are.
Right. Okay. Let's look at any more games here. So one big result, Lake Region and Camden in 8-man. We've talked a little bit about 8-man. 54-26 for Lake Region, which was a thing that jumped out at me.
Me too. After the Camden and Mount Era result, Lake Region I knew would be good. And of course, in the standings right now they are one.
They're all tied.
Yeah, they're all tied. All with one loss.
Camden
right?
Lake. Yeah, Camden Lake, Greeley, and Mount Era are all 5-1.
They're all 5-1. I was looking at yesterday just to kind of do some math as far as Crabtree points, and someone was mentioning overall the Crabtree points would have a team with a better record behind someone else. I'm like, well, it's all in who you play. And this particular school had played, I think, 3 of the 4 8-man large teams were all now 5-1. So yeah, Lake Region, might be they might have flown under the radar a little bit up to this point. With that result being as big as it was, that might have been something that kind of people have to take notice if they weren't already. And again, they're a team that's had moments. They've been right around it. We had to run to Mount Arrowhead a couple of times when Arrowhead had their juggernauts, but they might be the team now that you look at and say, all right, maybe it's Lake Region that we should be paying more attention to, as opposed to Ararat, Greeley, and Camden Hills as well. But 5-1, all four of those teams, going down the stretch. Fans should pay attention to that conference because maybe the first round won't be a whole lot, but with Greeley right now, Greeley MDI would be a great game, and I would say Ararat Greater Gloucester could be as well. But when you get to the Final Four in 8-man large, that's going to be a lot of fun overall. And in fact, I take that back. There's only 6 that make it in 8-man large. So you're going to look at some really good games all the way through the playoffs in 8-man large with so many good teams and tons of depth. And, I know MDI's 3-3, Gray's 3-3, but those are quality teams too.
I mean, to your earlier point, one reason maybe why Lake is under the radar is of those 4 teams, that's the hardest one to get to. So they're maybe the less likely to get the media coverage. They're going to get less media coverage than the other 3.
I think there's something to that. You don't notice them as much. And of course, Ararat's had, such a successful program. MDI, has really kind of stolen a lot of the attention with how good they've been. And Lake Region has been around there, but not at that level. Well, now it's clear they are at that level. So I think you might see a little more attention being paid to those folks down in Bridgeton than there had been over the course of the season so far.
And Camden's kind of new. They're new to 8-man, I'm pretty sure, but they're Camden. And so that's just a name that sticks out to you.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it does. And anyone who follows high school sports, knows how good Camden is at so many other sports, whether it's, basketball, boys and girls, soccer has been very good. So, yeah, and Lake Region, I might be the same way as well. And maybe it's just, you're closer to the mid coast, I'm closer to the capital. But, Lake Region has some very good teams in basketball and won state championships too. So maybe it might be our regional bias that kind of has us thinking that Lake Region's under the radar. Perhaps we talk to the 8-man community and the coaches will be like, nah, get under the art of your mind. We knew these guys were good from day one, and
you
we've
idiots.
been watching. You just haven't noticed as much because you're up in Augusta, and that might be the case.
I have my mid-coast bias because it takes 45 minutes to get to anybody, get to any of these other schools outside of in that circle.
And it's kind of nice living, where I live, and both Jared and I live around the same place, in Winthrop and Monmouth, that, a lot of places are less than an hour away, so we can easily get to them, and that does allow us to see and cover a lot of games.
Yeah, I think someone asked me last year, they're like, why don't you go to any AA games? I'm like, because the closest one is 2 hours away.
Right, yeah, yes. I mean, it would be. So, right, that would be it. And a lot of those you can see streams of as well. So if you want to watch Thornton Academy, especially in years past when they had that, they and I think they still do it, but I think from what their graduated broadcaster Cole Purvis told me that there wasn't anybody waiting in the wings like he was with Zach Tarenko. But I tuned into Thornton Academy just because I liked the quality of their broadcast, that Jeff Christenberry put their program together, and those 2 high school students, I was just blown away by how good they were at a young age. I could never hope to have been that good at a young age. I wasn't that good
better than some of the adults.
Yeah. I mean, we used both those guys on statewide tournament broadcasts in HOU, and they were really very good. And Thomas Curtis this year too from Gorham got involved in that. But that kind of speaks again to the idea, if you want to watch some of the Southern schools, you've got more opportunity to do so from the comfort of your living room rather than having to go see those games. Whereas if I want to go see Madomic play, I got to get out there. I want to see Lake Region play, I got to get to that game.
Yeah, the thing I was really impressed with those guys was during the tournament. Because I had seen them during the season and heard them and whatever, but during the tournament they were so professional.
Yeah, and
they were more professional than some of the adults.
I don't know Thomas. I was impressed by I've never met him. I've talked to him on Twitter. I've watched some of his broadcasts, but I mean, that didn't surprise me a bit about Zach 2 years ago and Cole last year. I mean, I just, Jeff Christenberry he's been broadcasting for a long time. You want to talk about someone who's going to be a great mentor for young broadcasters? That's him. And Cole and Zach have taken their craft really seriously. Both are now at various universities, Syracuse and Quinnipiac, doing broadcasting, and they're both very active, both very good. And problem is for us at HOU, we're never going to see those guys back in Maine. So I think we've lost those guys for good. They got a future ahead of them. So
they're gone to the Yankees.
Highly professional. And, Thomas Curtis was at Gorham as well. I just can't speak from experience, as I wasn't able to see as many of his games given that I was working off at the same time, but I did see what he did at Gorham. And I think it's just great to have the young kids being involved. I mean, I would have loved to have that opportunity when I was in high school. I would not have been nearly as good at it as those 3 were, but it would have been fun to cut my teeth in that and really kind of develop my craft starting then as opposed to starting in college.
We might be able to get him back for the tournament. with some
Yeah,
luck.
I'm guessing not, because I don't think either Quinnipiac or Syracuse break lines up with the tournament.
Mm,
And I'm pretty sure they will have, commitments to sports broadcasting at those respective schools. So I would love to have them back. I mean, believe me, if they could come back, it's not my call anymore. I don't schedule the Portland tournament, but I would think that if they could come back, Ethan Snow would take them both back in a second to
oh
put
yeah.
them in. I just don't think it's going to happen there. Their future is going to be somewhere, maybe back in Maine, but I'm guessing they'll be likely going out of state first and going where the gigs take them and being very
Hmm.
successful in doing so.
Let's hope. So speaking of TA, they have Portland this week. They're hosting
Yeah,
Portland. That's a pretty big game.
huge game.
Huge game.
Yeah, and TA, was one Ryan Kamiri long kickoff return from getting settled with their first in-state loss. I mean, Noble played them very close. Portland has one loss. They lost to Bonnie Eagle, who I think Bonnie Eagle is a good team that is kind of finding out how good they are. But
Hmm.
Portland was banged up that night. So, I don't want to, not making excuses, but you got to factor in reality. You lose a bunch of your top players, it's going to change how you play the game. I think Portland's back to pretty close to full strength. So that game with Thornton on Saturday is going to be a real big one to kind of show, what do things look like heading to the playoffs? Is there any chance that somebody from Class A North is going to be able to stand up to whoever comes out of Class A South, whether that's Thornton, Noble, Bonnie Eagle, South Portland, what have you? I think Portland has to have a good showing here. They don't necessarily have to win, but I think they have to have a very good showing, and I expect that they're going to. I'm very high in this Portland team. I still am, despite that one loss. I think they're going to give Thornton a game, and we'll see if that's a preview of what's to come at Fitzpatrick Stadium in November.
So the model has them as Thornton Academy by 10. Do
Okay.
you think Portland covers that?
If I were,
In our
I don't.
imaginary betting
If I was gonna, I don't bet anyway. But if I was, if this was a professional game, would I take Portland's 10 points? Yeah, I think I would.
I think I
Would
would
I take Portland?
in a
Would I
pro
take
game.
Portland? Yeah, I would. I'd take Portland.
Yeah, I would too. The model's been really high on Bonnie Eagle. Like they had a negative point differential and they were still in the top 10, which
They're a good team. They've got
is
talent
always
and
interesting.
yeah, and when they're healthy again, they've lost some pieces as well, but they got some back too. John Havu was an outstanding tight end and great defensive player. He wasn't in the lineup. We saw them in the first time we saw them against Oxford Hills. He was last week against South Portland. He's a difference maker. So you look at who's around, who's healthy, that plays a role. I think Bonnie Eagle's a very good team. We know they're well coached. We know they're a team that is well coached. They can make some huge upsets no one expects, as they did in the state finals a few years back, or a decade ago. No one expected they're going to be Thornton Academy, and everyone picked Thornton. And they go and do what they do in the state championship game. They win. They've never lost a state championship game they've played in. So
really?
it would
I
not
did not know
shock
that.
me. Yeah, 6-0. It would not shock me if they are a factor going down the stretch. Now, I still think the steal is with Thornton Academy and Noble, but you've got two teams right behind that in Bonnie Eagle, and we'll see what South Portland is able to do against Noble at home on Friday night as well. In our game of the week is one we're really looking forward to, because
That's
we
what
haven't
that's
seen
what you guys
Noble.
do.
They're very exciting, and South Portland, a very tough team that I think has something to prove.
Ooh, that's tempting. So Noble at South Portland. South Portland is favored by 1. A little over 1, I think, which that's a pretty good game.
It's a great game, and I don't know. I look at Noble and I see Jameer Rose, who is just somebody who has been almost flat out unstoppable, and he had a great game against Thornton Academy. Even the Trojans, really couldn't stop him. It's an old hope to contain him expression. I'm not even sure they did that. I'd see what Coach Kiesel has to say about what he felt about how they did against Rose, but such an explosive player. He's a guy who can make a difference. Quentin Lindsay, for example, type of player. That kind of guy who just by his mere presence and athleticism can bring his team to a victory. And South Portland's tough, good defense, physical. If they play to their top potential, it could be a very interesting game. We saw South Portland last at home. They just kept making undisciplined mistakes, and I know it drove Coach Filio crazy. He said as much in the paper afterwards, that he can accept certain mistakes. They happen during the game, mistakes where you're trying to make a play, hold's going to happen from time to time. But they were undisciplined, and it was a big focus for them. If they've worked that out of their system, it could be a really great game. If they are undisciplined again and give 15-yard chunks to Noble, they're going to get blown out. And I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what South Portland has to do. They have to play disciplined football and find a way to, have someone else beat them, I suppose, because, Jameer Rose is one of the most explosive players in the entire state.
In multiple sports.
Oh, yeah. We already know what he can do in the wintertime.
Yeah. So the real question, I think, is have you guys planned your food stop for before the game?
Yes, and I have to look up which one it is. I'm going to Google it right now as I'm talking to you. But we went last time to the Copper Kettle.
Oh, that sounds promising.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, wait, it was Copper. Oh, not Copper Kettle. That's in Topsom. I'll check that in a second. But I'm gonna look the pizza place up. It's Ethan Snow was telling us too that he's been there before. It is Willows. That's where we're going this time. So we're going to Willows, and that's been the kind of the, it's kind of. I started doing this when I was broadcasting on my own. That if we were doing a game for Time Warner and I could eat someplace in town where the game was being played. Sometimes you go in there and people will be going to the game as well and talking football. It was kind of a fun atmosphere. So, Jared and I started bringing that back, and we try to eat someplace, where the game's been played, if we can find a place in that town. So, yeah, we're going to Willows this time, and I think Ethan's going to meet us there, and that's our pregame stop, and yeah, we'll see how that is. It's always we're looking for the best mozzarella sticks so far, and so far it's Russell's and Wyndham is winning the mozzarella sticks challenge to this point.
This is very important. So Russell's and Wyndham, is this the place that had the Rustlers? Sorry,
yes,
that had the mozzarella moons.
They had the moons, place? Yeah, and they were. I mean, the sticks moons. It wasn't the shape that made them great. They were just really, really good.
I saw that on Twitter, and I'm like, "What the hell is a mozzarella moon?"
Yeah, they shape them like moons, a little thicker. The only problem with it is, with a mozzarella stick, you got your dipping sauce. One end, bite it, dip the other end. It's hard to do that with a moon. You take a bite out of it, and now you're kind of stuck. Where you do that, so you're not, double dipping, as Seinfeld made famous.
Right, and the trays, you gotta have like a wider thing to get in there, and right, like it's
they did. Well, they did. They brought us kind of a wider bowl to fit the entire moon in. So it was we made that work easily enough.
Well, that's very important. All right, let's see if there's any more big games. We talked about Falmouth. Kennebunk at Massabesic looks interesting.
It does look interesting. I mean, Kennebunk, I wasn't sure what to think of Kennebunk, going into the season overall, being defending champs, lost Jonah Barstow, lost some players. I know they had some guys coming back. When they had that game against Deering that they won, that's like, okay, this is a team that could go back and repeat. But Massabesic with one loss on the season, that'll be a very interesting challenge for Kennebunk in this game. Where is that game? Is that home or is that?
It's at Massabesic.
It's at Massabesic. Okay, so the one loss they had was to Deering, and it was a close loss. I know Kennebunk handled Deering, but Massabesic, I'm sure, must be playing Marshwood in the last game of the season. I don't know what that is either, but if they're playing Kennebunk at home, you look at these last two games with Marshwood coming on, and you're kind of seeing, a Massabesic team that the difference between, being 7-1 perhaps and having maybe the top seed in the playoffs, because being 5-3, and then it's anyone's ball game overall when you look at Kennebunk and Marshwood coming in. So that's a big one, I think, overall, more for Massabesic than Kennebunk. Kennebunk's clearly not assured of the number one spot yet at this point. They're only a little bit up on Deering and Massabesic, but you win that game, and I think you've pretty much solidified that you're going to be the top seed going in. But Massabesic, you look at where they could end up if they don't win this game, maybe as low as fourth, and I think they are still have designs on being number one.
Wow. All right, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I'm going to throw a question that I didn't prep you for about this. Give me a team that you think can win the gold ball, that if you told people that now, they'd go, wait, what? Like, give me a surprise gold ball winner.
All right, surprise gold ball
You can
winner.
throw multiple if you want, but for a team that's got momentum going, you can sort of see the pieces coming together.
That's a tough question.
Kind of like Caribou a couple years ago.
Right. I think people do see Noble as a contender to Thornton Academy. Maybe if people were considering Thornton Academy such a big favorite because of, who Thornton Academy is and has been over the last, almost 20 years now, then I guess I could pick Noble because I see them as being able to do it. But I'm not sure it's a great pick because they're 5-1 and everyone knows they're a very good team. So I'm not sure it's that. Same thing. You look at Winthrop Monmouth, and I'd pick them because, it's Wells, and Wells has owned Class D since they've been there. But Winthrop Monmouth's undefeated right now. Is that really going out on a limb to say that's a team that could win a gold ball? I'm not sure that it is. So I guess I'm going to look over in Class C, and
Looks like it's going to be a bloodbath.
that's the one. And I'm not sure many people are talking about the Herman Hawks.
Hmm.
So if I'm going to pick one right now, I'll say Herman. I mean, does that meet the criteria?
I think so. Herman,
because I'm hearing more Oceanside and Madomic Valley being kind of the big two overall in Class C. And I know
that was Herman's region before.
It was, and they're still right there at 4-2. Yeah, I guess to answer your question, that'll be my pick, the Herman Hawks.
You will have pissed off the entire Mid-Coast with this pick.
Well, I'm not saying that Oceanside or Madomic can't do it. You asked me someone who who can that no one's thinking of, so I'll go with Herman for that.
I think that's a good pick.
That's my choice.
That's a good pick. And one more question: do we think Lisbon's playing another game this year?
I don't.
I don't think so either.
And I don't know the ins and outs of what happened there. I mean, I know as much as you or anyone else does. So I've not really. We haven't brought it up in any broadcasts. I've not really commented about it. The only comments I've ever made in social media is about how school investigations work. Because working in a school, I do know a little bit about that. But I don't know what's going to happen. But I don't think it seems like they're not going to play this week, because if they were, I think would have heard about it by now. Because if they're not practicing, they're not playing Friday. I can't imagine how that would happen.
No, I don't think anyone thinks that's happening.
3 games they've missed, 3 weeks they've missed. How do you get in shape for 2 more games at that point? So I think my gut feeling is, and I'm not saying this is what they should do or what they shouldn't do. I'm not weighing into that at all. My gut feeling is they probably won't play another game this season just for that reason.
I wonder if there's a way. I was thinking about this the other day. If there's a way to get those teams that were supposed to play them, if it would be somehow possible, and I can't imagine it is, to get them to be able to play each other.
Well, the logistics, I'm not sure.
Just as the once a week thing.
It is, but those teams probably already have someone else scheduled. If you worked it out that one team was playing Lisbon this week, and another team was supposed to play Lisbon at a bye, if that was in the schedule, then it would fall into place. But it would take something like that to come together, because teams have their schedule set. And if you had Lisbon last week, you're moving on to your game this week, you don't have an opening in your schedule. So whoever Lisbon plays Wednesday. What's that?
You can't. It's not like you can play them on Wednesday.
No, you can't. I mean, you got one shot during the week to do that. You're not going to play midweek and then wipe yourself out for your game on Saturday if you wanted to have 2 days or 3 days in between. So or 2 days in between. So yeah, it's just too bad for everybody involved. It's too bad for the Lisbon community. Especially for the alleged victims at first. The kids who weren't involved. Too bad for their opponents. Potentially, if Coach Cates had no knowledge of this, and my gut feeling is that's the case, though I don't know for sure. I certainly wouldn't lay it at his feet at this point at all. So I feel bad for him too, because to me it kind of seems like this is something that kind of fell in his lap, that wasn't in his control. So yeah, it's kind of a tragic story all around, and I think we'd all be happier if the incident didn't happen and Lisbon's playing football as usual. But my gut feeling is that, missing as much as they have, and to me, it seems like they're likely to miss this week. If they do, I don't see how they come back for 2 more games. I'm just not sure how you do that.
Yeah, seems like they're pretty much toast. Well, that's a bummer of a note to end on.
It is. Why'd you say that one for last?
I don't know. It popped into my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got the WHOU game of the week this week is Noble at South Portland.
Yes.
What time is that game? Because I might go to that.
7:00 game. It's homecoming at South Portland as well, so it's 7:00 like most starts on a Friday night. And we're preparing for that one right now. And I really want to kind of send my props up to Jared Richmond as well, because I've been lucky. I've worked with some really good color commentators. Rob Munzing for a long time, and Jared Richmond is an awful lot like Rob Munzing in how he approaches color, in that he's a coach. And coaches sometimes can be really heavy on the coach speak. And when that happens, you're now explaining things to people who aren't coaches that may not really understand what you're trying to tell them. Rob Munzing is an expert at really kind of showing the game from a coach's perspective, but explaining it in layman's terms. And Jared Richmond does the same exact thing. And he's so quick to kind of see things that are on the field, especially defensively. That's really kind of his background more than anything else. offensively too, but he really notices defensive things and keys on them and can show fans in a replay, here's what happened, here's why it happened, in a way that someone who's not a football mind can understand. So I want to kind of throw the flowers out to Jared overall, because I think on a visual broadcast, it's the color commentator more than the play-by-play guy that really makes the broadcast what it is. And I'm fortunate to have him working color with me, or probably more accurately, I'm working play-by-play with him, because he really kind of showcases all that stuff so well that I learn stuff in the broadcast, and he points out things to me in real time that I didn't see. And it really kind of, I think, makes the broadcast that much better, and it makes me a better broadcaster. And Rob Munzing had that attribute as well. So I've been lucky to work with both those guys.
You're just there to set them up.
Essentially, yes. That's kind of what you do. Call the play, make it exciting, shut up and let them take over and kind of tell you their analysis and let you know what really happened now.
Awesome. All right. So if you don't already have your WHOU subscription, you should get your WHOU subscription, because you're going to need it for basketball season anyway. And that's coming up.
Finals as well. So, the state finals are exclusive on WHOU. There are no other video streams. There'll be audio streams. We're the only video stream. So if you want to watch the games from all venues, 8-man, 11-man, all the sites, we'll have them for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this, Rob.
Well, Lucas, it was great. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for having me.
Okay, that's the show. Thanks again to Rob Kennedy for joining me. As always, it's always a great time talking to him. This has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, your source for the most comprehensive coverage of Maine high school basketball from Ashland to York and everywhere in between. This podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts and a bunch of places you don't. If you enjoy this, please leave a nice review, because it really does help out with algorithms. Don't forget to subscribe to the site to get all the extra data you need to win your arguments in the stands with the dumb parent who is from the other school. Let's face it, they're all from the other school. All the dumb parents, they're from the other school. You hate them, and, throw some numbers at them. Make them feel stupid. Anyway, tell your friends, tell your enemies. Thanks for listening.